Hello and welcome to another iteration of the Any Given Saturday podcast. Because in this beautiful game that is college football, what you guys know as well as anyone else is that anything could happen on any given Saturday. Just as your favorite college team or maybe your most hated rival that was favored by 30, 40 points even, and ends up not only not covering, but losing outright. So needless to say, anything could happen on any given Saturday. Ladies and gentlemen, salvation is almost here. We are less than 30 days out from college football season officially kicking off. We are closing in on that August 26th date when Notre Dame and Navy is going to kick us off, not here in the continental United States. Oh no, but we're going out to Dublin, Ireland for that very first college football game being played that will actually be meaningful to regular season records and expectations. But with that being said, even though we are still about 25 days out from college football season, we got quite a bit got you covered on those peripherals. First and foremost, we have Jim Harbaugh. We have that suspension that was announced over the course of the past week. What kind of effect is that going to have on this Michigan football team as they embark on trying to defend their Big Ten championship as well as get back to the college football playoff for, I believe it is a third year in a row? What kind of effect will that have on the Michigan football program? In addition, we also have some crazy realignment news happening. Colorado making some noise, and we're starting to see the rumors swirl on the college football realignment. So we'll dive into just how aggressive could we expect the Big 12 conference to be, and is this the beginning of the end of the Pac-12? We'll dive into that later tonight. Even a little bit of talk from Congress about modifying the NIL laws that are currently in place, because we know the NCAA is a little bit incompetent when it comes to actually regulating NIL. So we'll dive into what Congress is actually proposing and whether that be good for athletes, and give my thoughts on that as well. So we have quite a bit to go over in this podcast tonight. But before we go into any of that, guys, I know what you guys need to do. There is an extremely high number of you guys who watch this channel but are not subscribed to this channel. And all I'm asking you is, what are we doing? What are we actually doing here? If you are enjoying the content here on the Any Given Saturday podcast, this first full college football season that we brought this podcast to like, please hit that subscribe button, man, so that we can grow this community. And while you're also there, it'll only take a couple of seconds, just a little scroll down to that bottom right-hand corner. Hit that like button for me, man, because it gets this video out to more college football fans like yourself. And that's why I assume that's why you're here watching this very video, this very podcast right about now. And finally, if you have any opinions that you want me to give, or you have a prediction of some sorts for this upcoming college football season, leave it for me down in the comments section, and I will gladly talk about it in a future podcast. I want this show, this very podcast, the Any Given Saturday podcast, to be a man of the people. I want your guys' inputs. I want your guys' opinions. But with that being said, guys, I think we got to dive into really one of the biggest news that we've heard ever since we last came on the air on Tuesday. You guys will probably, we're recording this on the 31st of July. You guys will probably see this the morning of August 1st. Feels so good that we are in the fall. And for future me, that is going to edit this podcast down later tonight, and we're going to, you'll see this in individual segments if you want to just check out an individual segment instead of a full-fledged podcast. I get it. Some of us don't have the greatest attention spans. I'm there with you. So for future me, this is your first starting point. So with that being said, there has been some absolutely electric news happening in college football realignment. I'm sure that you guys have heard the news. Most of us do not live under a rock, but Colorado is returning back to the Big 12 Conference. They were a team that was members of the Pac-12 for quite some time. They actually historically were members of the Big 12. They were there from 1996 to 2010. So for those of you that are a little bit older, you remember a time that Colorado was actually in the Big 12 Conference. But from 2011 to 2023, which will be their last year, they were members of the Pac-12. And starting the next season, the Big 12 Conference, they are going to add the Colorado Buffaloes. So we'll go ahead and jump into the Big 12 first, and then we'll dive into what that could mean for the Pac-12 and what kind of implication that it could have on the self-proclaimed Conference of Champions. But diving into the Big 12 Conference first, imagine losing two of the bigger brands in college football, Oklahoma and Texas. Some people may not consider them the top brand in college football, but Oklahoma and Texas, there's no denying they are extremely big brands that are going to the SEC. And yet the Big 12, in spite of losing Oklahoma, in spite of losing Texas as well, they're still going to be in a pretty solid position. They already have added Cincinnati, who did become the very first group of 5 team to make it to the college football playoff. They are also adding UCF, who has actually the highest enrollment in the United States in terms of number of college students that are on their campus as well. BYU is being added on to this list as well. They had some pretty good years as of recent. And then, of course, Houston is being added as well to help strengthen back up that Texas footprint. So they're losing Oklahoma and they're losing Texas. And those are big losses for any conference. But the Big 12, even though that they're losing arguably the 2 biggest brands in the Big 12 conference right now, they're going to be okay. The Big 12 is going to be okay because even without Oklahoma, even without Texas, this past college football season has shown that they can still get in to the college football playoff. There is still some high quality football. Last year's Big 12 championship game did not have Oklahoma or Texas in there. So they are more than capable of, as a national conference, they can continue to be relevant and be part of that national conversation. And while Colorado has not been good as of late, there is certainly a lot of buzz around that Colorado program right now. Deion Sanders, most notably, a big reason why there's a lot of buzz around this Colorado team, a lot of changes made to that roster, a much better roster than what they had in 2022. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to Colorado here in the final season that they are in the Pac-12 conference. Now, what this does do for the Big 12 conference is that when we get to 2024, as of right now, because we don't know what else is going to happen with college football realignment, we might be coming back here next week talking about some other realignments being announced. We just don't know what's happening in today's college football landscape. I would not be surprised if I'm coming back on here next week and talking about the Big 12 or some other conference, announcing some other news to you guys. It's just that wild right now. But the Big 12 will be at 13 teams as of right now at this current moment. So I would imagine that they are not going to want to have an odd number of teams, at least not long term. Nobody likes having an odd number of teams in their conference. I think we can all get behind that regardless of who we root for over the course of college football season. I think we can all get behind that, right? But that being said, I've heard some rumors about Arizona and Arizona State possibly being invited to the Big 12 conference, and we'll see if that comes into fruition or not. But if I'm the Big 12 commissioner and I'm looking for a 14th team, I'm honestly looking at Utah. I'm looking at giving Utah a call because, first and foremost, for those of you that watch this podcast for at least the first couple of episodes, you guys know I like having that regionality and traditions kept up as much as humanly possible, right? That's something that I truly care about. And adding Utah, you already have BYU in the conference joining up with the Cougars having their first year in the Big 12, but you get to have the Holy War in your conference. The Battle of Utah could be a nice little rivalry game to add on the Big 12 slate. And not to mention, Utah has just been a dang good football team. Utah hasn't made the college football playoff, but they went to the Rose Bowl in back-to-back years. Ohio State back in 2021, and then they took on Penn State in 2022. They lost both games, but, it takes a certain amount of special to make it to the Rose Bowl. And they did that because they won the Pac-12 the last couple of years. Again, they have not made it to the college football playoff yet, but they've been really close. So if I'm the Big 12, I'm looking to add Utah possibly to be that 14th team. And then if you want to go and add Arizona and Arizona State, to me, that's icing on the cake. Get yourself to that 16-team mark. And, I'm not saying that it will put them at the same level of a Big Ten as well as the SEC. Those are just on two different levels right now, but Big 12 would be in a really nice spot, regardless of if they just go to 14 teams or up to 16 teams. Now, on the flip side of that, we're looking at the Pac-12, and I don't want to be gloom and doom because I like the football that could be played out of Pac-12 this year. Pac-12 is going to have some amazing football here in 2023. There's a lot of intriguing storylines on the field. I'm not even talking about off the field. I am purely talking about on the football field. Right now, we could have some great football action out here in the Pac-12 conference. That could really happen, but we got to look at it from the lens of, okay, so before the last college football season, we saw them lose UCLA and USC. They are bolting for the Big Ten, and this season is going to be their last year in the Pac-12. They're all also losing Colorado, so they're down to 9 teams just like that. The only other conference at the FBS level that has 9 teams or less is Conference USA, and I gave my thoughts about Conference USA in the last pod. I think Conference USA is going to be the worst conference in college football this season for different reasons. Pac-12 will still have better football than that, but you don't want to be in the same conversation as Conference USA. I don't think anyone really wants that. No disrespect to anybody that does root for a Conference USA school. Don't get me wrong. But they're losing free schools already. We have rumors of Arizona and Arizona State possibly bolting for the Big 12. We also have Oregon and Washington being rumored to try to join the Big Ten as well. Get them up to 18 teams. So, and that's not to mention what's Utah thinking right now. What's Oregon State and Washington State thinking right now. Same with Cal. Same with Stanford. We might be seeing the beginning of the end. And so if I'm the Pac-12, first and foremost, got to get that media deal done as soon as possible. I don't know how much more desirable it's going to be now that there's even less of a product than what there was this time last week that we're talking about, but it's not looking good. So we might dive a little bit more in next week's pod about what the Pac-12 could do to try to bolster up that conference and get them back up to where it would make sense for them to have divisions and have a conference championship again at that 12-team mark. Man, we could be witnessing the beginning of the end of the Pac-12, and I don't know if I like it. I just don't know if I like it at all. But for Colorado, I understand where they're coming from. Historically, they were more known as a Big 12 team. Go off Kings, and wishing Colorado the best in the Big 12 next season. But that being said, Pac-12 still going to have some great football, but might be the last time that we are actually talking about the Pac-12 conference in that overall national conversation. Now, folks on the West Coast might still care about the Pac-12 after this season, but after this season, unless you live on the West Coast, I could see it to where a lot of people are just not going to care what's happening west of the Rocky Mountains. That's just how I read that situation out there in terms of the college football realignment. So that being said, speaking of some things that have broke over the course of the last week, we do have some news on Jim Harbaugh. We did actually find out that Jim Harbaugh was suspended for 4 games. First 4 games of the season. He is going to be suspended as well. So it's really interesting how this came about. So Harbaugh is not being suspended for necessarily the violations themselves. So allegedly, and this is from SBNation.com, allegedly, Harbaugh is being suspended because he made false statements to the NCAA in response to the NCAA investigation that they were looking into Michigan for potential recruiting violations that he and that Michigan staff may have made during the COVID-19 dead period. We recently, actually a couple of weeks ago, saw Tennessee's investigation during that same time period wrapped up. Now, the Michigan program itself was not punished. They're not going to lose any scholarships, no fine, nothing like that. But it's just crazy why Harbaugh was suspended, right? And it's why so many people criticize the NCAA. So I'm reading this verbatim. I'll try to link it down either in the description or in the pinned comment, or like pin a comment down below so that you guys can check out the article itself. So the NCAA cited 4 level 2 violations. So that includes meeting with recruits during a COVID-19 dead period. So it's during the calendar year where coaches cannot meet with recruits in a physical presence, texting recruits outside the allowable time period. So Harbaugh met these recruits at, I guess there's a restaurant called the Brown Jug. I guess that's around Ann Arbor, Michigan. I've never been in the area, because that's where Harbaugh bought, food for the recruits. And it's nothing fancy. It's not like, he's getting these recruits filet mignon and lobster and scallops. No, none of that. None of that. Burgers. He's being suspended over burgers, and I guess it was that Harbaugh couldn't specifically recall, and so the NCAA came out and said, well, you lied to us, so we're going to go ahead and suspend you. And they cited a level 1 violation for Jim Harbaugh lying to these investigators as well. But here's even the crazier part about how this 4-game suspension came about, okay? Y'all are not going to believe this, okay? So it was actually negotiated. Harbaugh and the NCAA negotiated and agreed. They both agreed to this 4-game suspension. Like, do you know how insane that actually sounds? That this was agreed upon, right? It's not even that Harbaugh admitted to doing anything wrong. Like, it would be different if Harbaugh was like, yeah, I definitely did some wrongdoings. That's on me. I could see why there would be a little bit more of a negotiation. And again, it doesn't even seem like Harbaugh actually lied. He just doesn't recall. That there's a difference in that. These are older people that we're talking about. These folks' memories might not necessarily be the sharpest. Let's be real. The memory might not always be there, unless it's football, of course. They're college football coaches for a reason. So the NCAA and Harbaugh, they agreed on these suspensions. They agreed to this. Like, let me equate it like this, right? Imagine that you're in court and you're just observing court and you see someone accused and later found guilty of murder. And instead of the judge doing the sentencing all by himself, remember, there's no plea deal. There is no plea deal here in this situation. But the judge goes back and forth with the convicted murderer and, just straight up asks him, how much do you want to be in prison for? How much you want your prison to be? Like, does that make any sense? Because that doesn't make any sense to me personally. And again, I don't think Harbaugh should have been punished anyways, and I'm saying this as a supporter of Ohio State athletics. So all bias out of the way. I don't want to say Ohio State fan. I'm more of a supporter of Cincinnati Bearcats athletics than I am of Ohio State. I'm more of a Cincinnati Bearcats fan. I know I'm in that minority where I'm a Cincinnati fan, but still root for Ohio State to a degree. Sue me. If I'm calling foul on something Michigan related from the NCAA, there's a problem. Now, with Jim Harbaugh being suspended for the next 4 games, the good news is the schedule is not that tough for the Michigan Wolverines. Really, a lot of what they got to go ahead and do, the 2 of their most important games, they don't face anyone that's projected to be in the top 25 until November 11th when they go on the road to play against Penn State. But that's well beyond that 4-game suspension. They're worried about Penn State and they're worried about Ohio State. These other games, who cares, right? Who actually legitimately cares? So the first 4 games that they have, they open up the season September 2nd against Eastern Carolina. Now, Eastern Carolina actually was a solid team last year. They ended up going 8-5, and they did end up winning the Birmingham Bowl against Coastal Carolina, another really good Group of 5 program out of the Sun Belt Conference. They almost pulled the upset on NC State when they were ranked in the top 25 at the time. Didn't quite work out that way, but Eastern Carolina, they do have a solid team, but going on the road into the big house, I don't see why Michigan fans would be too terribly worried as long as they come ready to play. And then after that, all of these other teams that Michigan's got to play while Jim Harbaugh is suspended, none of these other 3 teams are ranked in the top 25. So Eastern Carolina is the only team that's actually above 500 in terms of their record. So UNLV just fired their head coach. They have a new head coach. UNLV went 5-7 last year, including 3-5 in Mountain West Conference play, right? And they also came in, they lost. Well, they're actually really close to going to a bowl game. They started the year 4-1, but they're going in the wrong direction right now. They lost, I'm counting it right now, 6 consecutive games before winning against Nevada in the battle for the Fremont Cannon. So they lost 6 of their last 7 games. So UNLV is not necessarily bringing in a lot of so-called momentum, right? That's just not happening. So UNLV went 5-7, not going in a positive direction right now. This Rebels team has to go on the road and play Michigan as well. Then, following that September 9th game, we have another home game. I know, a lot of home games to start out for Michigan. If you're going to have a guy suspend for 4 games, this wouldn't be a bad time to do it. So they play Bowling Green next on September 16th. The following weekend, it's on Big Ten Network. Bowling Green also went below 500, but a little bit different of a case for the Bowling Green Fountains. They actually did go to a bowl game, right? So they finished the regular season 6-6. They went 5-3 in the MAC, so they were an above average MAC team. Their only non-conference win was to Marshall. They played an FCS team last year in Eastern Kentucky. They lost to Eastern Kentucky in 7 overtimes. But regardless, they did make it to a bowl game. They played New Mexico State in the Quick Lane Bowl out in Ford Field up in Detroit, Michigan. Lost New Mexico State in the Quick Lane Bowl. So that's how they ended up finishing below 500. Again, this was not a team that was very good in non-conference play. 1-3 outside of the MAC. That includes an FCS loss as well. And again, Bowling Green is going to have to go up I-75 in order to go and play this Michigan squad. So don't know who the interim coach is going to be during the time that we do end up seeing Jim Harbaugh coach, but Bowling Green should be an issue. Then, and this is where it gets crazy, guys. This is where it gets real crazy here, ladies and gentlemen. They open up Big Ten conference play. And they will be taking on the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, baby. So they play Rutgers as their first Big Ten conference game on September 23rd. That's also a noon game as well. Home game. So again, full month of the season, Michigan does not leave home until the Nebraska game, but Jim Harbaugh will be back by then. And like what we talked about with UNLV, this Rutgers team is also a team that's going in the wrong direction. They went 4-8 last year, and this is even with them winning their first 3 games against Boston College, Wagner, Temple. So do what you want with that information. They proceed to end the year on a 5-game losing streak, and they only won 1 game. They only won 1 game in their last 9 games. So after they got done with their non-conference slate, they lost 8 of their next 9 games. That's after they went on a 3-0 start. So again, another team that probably doesn't have a lot of momentum right now as a program. You never know what can happen, how guys can develop or what kind of injuries could happen to various teams around the country. But last time that Rutgers played Michigan, this was at Rutgers' home stadium, Shai Stadium in Piscataway, New Jersey. Michigan did beat them 52-17, right? So again, it's a pretty navigatable schedule. They should be 4-0, straight up and down. The only team that could possibly give them a little bit of trouble is maybe East Carolina. East Carolina, when they play their A+ game and Michigan doesn't come out and maybe play the sharpest in those openers, we could see things get a little bit spicy in that first game of the season, but after that, I don't see why this team couldn't go 4-0 while Jim Harbaugh is suspended. And frankly, I expect this Michigan team still to be 9-0 before they have their showdown against Penn State on the road. I think Penn State and Ohio State are the only 2 teams that have a realistic shot. Maryland, we'll see what happens. I know the Maryland coach feels some type of way of what his team could possibly do this upcoming season. And he actually said the words that he wants to compete for the Big Ten East title. That's a bold strategy, Con. We'll see if it works out for him. But I don't see how Michigan loses a game while Jim Harbaugh is on his suspension. I think they'll be fine. Maybe the development might be a little bit slower, depending on who's coaching this team. And, maybe they don't win as impressively as maybe they should. But in terms of them actually losing a game, I'm not calling it, right? So that's just how I feel about the Jim Harbaugh situation. And I'm saying that as a Ohio born and raised guy. So that's just my humble opinion on that for the matter. But speaking of all the crazy things that are happening in college football right now, how about what's happening with NIL? I'm going to try not to go into NIL like a little bit too much. The last time I posted about NIL, y'all weren't really feeling it that much, but I wanted to bring it up because I thought it was really interesting personally. So last week, actually on the the 26th of July, so this was on a Wednesday. So Congress is actually trying to do something in terms of actually trying to relaunch legislative efforts in terms of the college athletes' ability to make money from the name, image, and likeness, which, that was taken out of the can back in 2021. So NIL has not been around for very long. There is a tremendous advantage for student athletes that are naturally born here in the United States, are birthright U.S. citizens. So one current loophole that is in the the name, image, and likeness right now that maybe not as many people are talking about, because frankly we don't have very many notable college athletes that are not here born in the United States, right? That don't immigrate here in order to compete in college athletics. So one big hole in the NIL thing is that with the current U.S. student visa rules regarding like work that's done by foreign students that allows them to come into the United States and get a college education at one of the many universities that are here in the United States. So with those rules that are currently in place, it's extremely difficult for those athletes that are on NCAA teams to have deals the same way that American athletes can. So that puts foreign-born student athletes at a tremendous disadvantage. Well, there's a new bill that's been proposed. No votes have been taken on it yet. We know how Congress likes to move, trying to be as neutral as possible, right? So two congressmen did formally launch a bill. What this bill would do, this is from USA Today. So if you guys want to read this article, you guys are more than welcome to. I'll try to have it down somewhere in the comment section if I can't post in the description, since apparently my channel is too new to have like links in the description. I know, weirdest thing, but whatever. So new bill would formally affiliate collectives with respect to the schools, and require schools to be in compliance of like Title IX when it comes to like the NIL stuff. So basically you can't discriminate on NIL deals whether you're a male or a female student athlete. So that type of thing. This is actually, there's been other versions of an NIL bill from Congress that's been reintroduced in the past, but this particular one, the most recent one, is the most student athlete friendly. The other ones have been more lenient towards the NCAA, but the difference between this one and what's been done in the past, so the NCAA ones, for example, in exchange for having these clarified regulations on NIL, it would put limits on the athlete's ability to transfer, as well as give the NCAA a measure of legal protection against future lawsuits connected to other changes that might happen under the bill as well. So this one is more pro-athlete than previous versions. I think that this is, I don't think Congress shouldn't have to get involved. I think this is something the NCAA could do. The problem with that is that the NCAA doesn't like giving up power. Straight up and down. Because I think what the NCAA realizes is now that these student athletes have all of these NIL things in place, what is the NCAA there for? Honestly, what is the NCAA actually here for? Like, riddle me that, Batman. But like the NCAA does not have very much power anymore. I mean, shoot, going back to that Jim Harbaugh suspension as well. I mean, you thought that he was guilty, but then he didn't even admit to being guilty, and you're going to negotiate with the guy's suspension? Like, what are we trying to accomplish here? So I'll have the full link in the like the USA of that USA Today article talking about that. I'll try to link that either in the description or in the comment section. Definitely, if you're more interested in the like the workings of NIL, I'll definitely give it a read for sure. I just thought that it was interesting and certainly intriguing for that matter. So that being said, I know this is a little bit shorter of a podcast than maybe what we had in the first couple of weeks, but guys, I am just excited for college football to be here. Guys, for those of you that are really craving for football, I've been really craving football myself. We do have NFL preseason on Thursday. For those of you that, have a tickle for preseason football, first NFL game is on Thursday. So real football's around the corner, guys. We've been hanging strong all summer, all spring long. We're hanging together, and it's almost here. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and start signing off. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, even though it's a little bit of a lesser length than, that's what she said, than the first couple that we produce here on the channel. If you did enjoy this podcast, I strongly encourage you to go ahead and like the podcast if you haven't done so already, because what that does is when you hit that like button and when you're watching this all the way through, you're getting this video out to other college football fans. And one thing that I really want to do, I want to build a community that is for the people, by the people. So I always want to have a college football show that is centered around you guys and what you guys want to talk about. And that goes into what you can do in the comments section. Not only, you can let me know like any feedback, because this is only my third podcast doing this thing. First with the webcam, we finally got it in. It was in my face the first couple of weeks, and for some reason I couldn't find it. It was the time to turn on the camera. That's besides the point, though. But you can go in the comment section, and if there's something that you want me to give an opinion on, or if you have a prediction that you want me to talk through, go ahead and leave that for me in the comment section. I read all your guys' comments, and as such, if depending on what the nature of the comment is, I will include it in the next podcast. We will talk through it and see where you're coming from. You know what I'm saying? So definitely, I encourage you to go ahead and jump into that comment section. Let me know what you're feeling, as we are just a few weeks away from college football season. And of course, if you're brand new, if you are brand spanking new to the channel, hit that subscribe button for me. I would truly appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. I really want to grow this college football community. Would love to get to 100 subscribers before we get into the actual college football season. And dare I say it, maybe 1,000 subscribers before the end of college football season. And you guys can do that being a part of something new, being OGs in this community. That's what you can be when you hit that subscribe button. So if you want to do that, just go to that little button in the right-hand corner, that lower right-hand corner. All it takes is one click, and you can be a part of the Any Given Saturday community, being one of the founding members of the Any Given Saturday ride. So that being said, I'm going to hop off here for tonight here on this Tuesday podcast, or at least you guys will be seeing this on Tuesday. But that being said, I will see you guys next time as we get a little bit closer to college football season. I'm your host, Jake, and I'll catch you later.